Breaking tonight, a diplomatic earthquake has just shattered Britain standing in the Middle East, and the aftershocks are spreading globally. No warnings. No negotiations. No second chances. Benjamin Netanyahu has issued the most severe rebuke ever delivered to a British government, an outright ban on every UK official entering Israel. Not since the Suez Crisis has London suffered humiliation at this scale. And it all began with two decisions Keir Starmer made in total secrecy, without briefing his cabinet, his diplomats, or his intelligence chiefs. What comes next threatens Britain's safety, economy, and alliances. This is not politics. This is a security emergency. The collapse did not begin with a war, a scandal, or a negotiation gone wrong. It began with two sentences spoken by Keir Starmer, sentences that detonated one of Britain's oldest and most strategically vital alliances. When Starmer publicly announced that his government supported the International Criminal Court's arrest warrants for senior Israeli leaders, Jerusalem was stunned. But the shock turned into outright disbelief when he followed it with a full arms embargo, an embargo that went far beyond the expected suspension of offensive weaponry. Starmer targeted everything, including the defensive systems Israel uses to intercept rockets from Hamas, Hezbollah, and Iranian proxies. For Israeli officials, this was not a moral gesture or a diplomatic disagreement. This was abandonment. What made the situation explosive was not just the decision, but how it was made. Starmer bypassed his cabinet entirely. No security committees were briefed. No intelligence officers were consulted. Even Britain's ambassador to the UN was left completely in the dark. Israel realized something was wrong the moment their diplomats received the announcement before London's own agencies did. Overnight, a 75-year alliance, built through wars, crises, intelligence cooperation, and shared threats, was severed with no warning, no strategy, and no plan. It was the moment Britain flipped from ally to unpredictable actor, and Jerusalem took notice immediately. The diplomatic fallout hit London faster than any analyst predicted. Dame Barbara Woodward, Britain's ambassador to the UN and one of the most respected diplomats in the Foreign Service, learned about Starmer's new policy not from Downing Street, but from an Israeli diplomatic protest delivered to her office in New York. The humiliation was immediate and public. Within hours, she submitted her resignation, an act that sent shockwaves through the Foreign Office. Veteran diplomats whispered that nothing like this had happened in modern British history. Inside Whitehall, confusion turned to panic. MI6 officers scrambled to determine whether the decision came with any security assessment. It hadn't. MI5 analysts searched for briefings or directives. None existed. A foreign policy earthquake had been triggered with no coordination across the very institutions responsible for Britain's national security. Then came the moment that defined Britain's loss of credibility. David Lammy's plane, mid-flight to Tel Aviv for scheduled meetings, was denied landing clearance by Israeli air traffic control. A G7 foreign minister turned around over the Mediterranean like a tourist who missed check-in. The footage went viral within minutes. Around the world, diplomats expressed disbelief. Some mocked Britain's sudden irrelevance, others worried this signaled deeper instability. For the first time in decades, the United Kingdom looked disorganized, uninformed, and dangerously unprepared for the consequences of its own actions. At exactly 9 p.m. Jerusalem time, cameras clicked on and the world watched a scene that immediately signaled something historic. Benjamin Netanyahu walked to the podium flanked by his full security cabinet, defense chiefs, intelligence heads, and senior ministers, all standing behind him in a unified wall of resolve. No smiles. No hesitation. The posture alone told observers everything. This was not a dispute. This was a break. Netanyahu's message was short, sharp, and delivered with the cold finality of a leader who believed his nation had been betrayed. A country that abandons its allies in their hour of need, he said, should not expect friendship in return. Within minutes, the first retaliatory orders were signed. By dawn, every intelligence-sharing program between the UK and Israel, worth billions in technology, surveillance networks, counterterrorism data, and cyber defense, was suspended. This was not symbolic punishment. It was strategic. Israel removed the protections Britain had relied on for decades, demonstrating in real time what happens when trust at this level collapses. Behind the scenes, Israeli insiders used even harsher language. Several officials anonymously confirmed to Israeli media that the relationship was permanently damaged, beyond repair, and structurally broken. According to them, Britain's shift was not a disagreement, it was a breach of alliance obligations, the kind that nations rarely forgive. The scale of what Britain lost overnight is almost impossible for the public to comprehend. For years, Israeli intelligence has served as the silent shield behind some of the UK's most critical counter-terrorism victories. In just the past 3 years, Israeli agencies helped stop 17 terror attacks planned on British soil, plots targeting airports, synagogues, public gatherings, and transportation hubs. That pipeline of life-saving intelligence has now gone dark. But the blackout doesn't stop there. Israel's cyber defense units had been monitoring vulnerabilities across Britain's national infrastructure, energy grids, water systems, and major banking networks. Their teams routinely intercepted cyber attacks before they reached British servers. Hours after Netanyahu's announcement, those teams were pulled. The protection vanished instantly. Real cases underscore the gravity. In 2021, Israeli intelligence thwarted a kidnapping attempt targeting a British businessman's daughter. MI5 sources say operations like that cannot be replicated by any other ally. Now, Mossad officials classify Britain as a security risk, meaning information that once flowed freely is now blocked entirely. Britain is effectively blind in regions where Israel's networks were its eyes and ears. The danger is immediate. Iran-backed groups, cyber adversaries, and international criminal networks are already probing the gaps. For the first time in decades, Britain is operating without one of the most advanced intelligence shields in the world, and the exposure is growing by the hour. The ripple effects of Britain's break with Israel spread far beyond the Middle East. Within hours, senior officials in Saudi Arabia, the UAE, and Jordan privately backed Israel's position, signaling that they viewed Britain's sudden policy shift as reckless and destabilizing. These states, core partners in the Abraham Accords network, depend on predictable, loyal alliances. Britain's abrupt reversal shattered trust. For them, if London can abandon Israel under pressure, it can abandon anyone. NATO allies began asking the same uncomfortable question. In Brussels, diplomats wondered whether Britain could still be counted on in a crisis. Poland, which relies heavily on UK security guarantees, quietly asked whether London would yield similarly if Moscow or Tehran exerted political pressure. Confidence in British reliability faded almost overnight. In Washington, the reaction was far more severe. The CIA has long depended on the UK, Israel, US intelligence triangle to track threats across North Africa, the Mediterranean, and Europe. Starmer's decision fractured that triangle instantly. Without Israeli data, the entire regional threat map is compromised. Senior CIA officials expressed fury behind closed doors, calling the move reckless and strategically incomprehensible. Then came the public warnings. Former CIA Director Mike Pompeo declared that Britain is choosing irrelevance over influence, predicting that history would judge the decision harshly. European governments echoed his sentiment. Across the continent, doubts grew: is Britain still a pillar of Western security, or has it become a liability? Financial markets responded immediately and brutally. Within hours of Netanyahu's announcement, the British pound fell sharply against the Israeli shekel, an extraordinary reversal that signaled how global investors interpreted the crisis. A partner abandoning Israel was, in their view, a partner abandoning stability. That sentiment hardened as reports surfaced that £30 billion in bilateral trade was now under review by Israeli ministries. The tech sector was hit even harder. Israeli venture funds, major players in Europe's innovation landscape, froze all UK investments. Overnight, dozens of fast-growing British startups lost funding streams they relied on for survival. Cybersecurity firms, biotech labs, and defense R&D teams described the sudden pullout as catastrophic. Contracts that had taken years to build evaporated in hours. The long-term damage is even more alarming. Analysts predict Britain stands to lose £100 billion in combined value across biotech, cyber defense, pharmaceuticals, aerospace, and artificial intelligence over the next 5 years if the freeze persists. Many Israeli-led projects have already shifted to the United States, Germany, and the Netherlands, countries investors now view as more reliable partners. London's reputation as a tech powerhouse, once secured by its deep cooperation with Israeli innovation, collapsed with stunning speed. For the first time in decades, Britain is no longer seen as a natural home for cutting-edge development. The message from global markets is unmistakable: trust is currency, and Britain just spent all of it in a single week. Inside 10 Downing Street, the atmosphere shifted overnight from strategy to chaos. Panic replaced policy. Cabinet meetings that once focused on long-term planning now revolved around damage control, containment, and public messaging. Defense Secretary John Healey called Starmer's decision strategically suicidal, warning that Britain had voluntarily removed its shield in one of the world's most volatile regions. Home Secretary Yvette Cooper echoed the alarm, declaring that the UK was now a target without protection, exposing both citizens and critical infrastructure to unprecedented risk. Leaked intelligence assessments only intensified the crisis. MI5 officials disclosed that Iranian-backed proxy groups were already probing gaps created by the sudden suspension of Israeli collaboration. Operations that had been quietly neutralized for years were now testing Britain's defenses, exploiting vulnerabilities that only Israeli insight had previously mitigated. Security agencies scrambled, realizing that warning times for potential threats had been halved, leaving civilians and government systems exposed. Public tension surged. Jewish communities, long reliant on discreet protective coordination with Israeli agencies, found themselves suddenly exposed. Synagogues, schools, and cultural centers increased private security measures as anxiety spread. Citizens questioned whether the government could guarantee their safety. News of potential threats circulated rapidly on social media, creating a climate of fear and uncertainty. For the first time in decades, the British public faced the stark reality: a major foreign policy decision had left them unprotected, vulnerable, and questioning whether their leaders understood the stakes. The human toll of Britain's abrupt diplomatic rupture became clear almost immediately. British students enrolled in Israeli universities and research programs received emergency notifications, visas cancelled, exchanges terminated, and labs closed. Academic collaborations that had fostered innovation and mutual understanding for decades were abruptly halted, leaving scholars stranded and projects in limbo. Journalists covering Israel were denied access, preventing accurate reporting and deepening public confusion about the unfolding crisis. The British embassy in Tel Aviv itself was effectively frozen out, unable to operate with the access and credibility necessary to protect citizens abroad. For Britain's Jewish communities, the implications were far more immediate and personal. Security coordination with Israeli intelligence, long a quiet but essential safeguard, vanished overnight. Synagogues scrambled to hire private security, schools doubled security staff, and families questioned whether the government could guarantee their protection. Rising uncertainty drove an increase in immigration inquiries to Israel and the United States as citizens explored safer options abroad. The core issue was clear: national security failures destroy public trust far faster than economic mismanagement. Citizens can endure inflation, job losses, and tax hikes, but when lives are perceived to be at risk due to government missteps, confidence evaporates almost instantly. Starmer's handling of the Israel crisis became a glaring example of how secrecy, unilateral decision-making, and ignoring intelligence assessments can undermine an entire party's legitimacy. Within Labour, panic spread behind closed doors. MPs warned of long-term damage to party credibility, noting that even if the foreign policy were reversed, rebuilding trust with the electorate, and with allies abroad, would take years. Senior strategists feared that the Labour brand had been permanently weakened in the eyes of voters who value reliability, competence, and national security. Every discussion in Parliament and party meetings revolved around damage control, but the reality was stark: the political earthquake had already hit, and the tremors would continue for months. In just 7 days, the UK has entered a landscape where ignorance is not just costly, it is potentially deadly. The future will be defined by this single, catastrophic week of diplomacy, and the nation must now navigate a perilous reality it did not choose and cannot yet control.